Hi, my name is Michael Gallagher, and welcome to Civic Sanctuary, a monthly one-hour program on matters of civic relevance to folks in the Greater Lowell area, produced and sponsored by Lowell Votes, a nonpartisan voting rights organization. The subject matter for this month's program is a very interesting one with very interesting panelists. It's our local and regional media, and let me introduce those panelists to you. On my far left is a longtime friend and actually somewhat of a relative. Mimi is the sister of my brother's wife. This is Muriel Mimi Parsegian. Everyone knows her as Mimi. She's a longtime astute political observer and Democratic activist and one of the area's great bloggers. First for Left and Lowell for a number of years and more recently for richardhowe.com. And over the last number of months, she has done the council preview. Welcome, Mimi. Thank you for joining us.
Nice being here.
To Mimi's right and my left is a fella I've just had the opportunity to meet, but he's going to be a lot of fun, I can tell, in this hour. His name is Steve Rat Albert. Yep. And Steve comes to us from what many call the creative economy of Lowell. A native Lowellian, Steve is closely associated with the former 119 Gallery and also the Lowell Canal Cleaners. He's well known for various video-based art productions, including most recently a series entitled Rats in the Kitchen. And you can search for him under the name Rat Bass. Is that right?
Ratbass.com, yeah.
Ratbass.com. Steve also is celebrated, I'm told, in Lowell's political punditry circles as an author of a series of haikus. He's the first haikuist I have ever met. And the haikus were not just haikus, they were based on the Sun's back talk columns. I can't wait to read these, Steve. Steve's poetic interpretations were printed regularly on a Lowell blog called The Sons of Frankie Cabot. Very nice to meet you.
Likewise, Michael.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
To my right is Soben Pin. Soben is not just the publisher, but the co-founder of the Khmer Post USA, an independent newspaper which aims to facilitate mass communication among the Cambodian communities and their neighbors. It's often free, and it serves Cambodian communities in 7 states along the eastern seaboard with a readership of more than 50,000. Soben was born in Vietnam during the tumultuous years after the fall of South Vietnam. In 2000, she immigrated halfway across the world to California and later moved east and is a graduate of Penn State. Welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
To Soben's right is our good friend Theodoros Panagiotopoulos. Kalispera Tikanos. Everyone knows Teddy as Teddy Panos. He's the voice of the Merrimack Valley. He's the morning talk show host for the Lowell-based radio station 980 WCAP. What you may not know is that since 2007, back some time ago, Teddy worked in television as a sports reporter and an anchor for, let me make sure this is right, WNDS, TV Channel 50.
The dearly departed.
Really?
WNDS, yes.
And Teddy won. He's a very humble fellow, but he did win the 2003 and 2005 Golden Mike Award for Best Sports Feature, presented by the New Hampshire Association of Broadcasters. It was also awarded the 2009 Peter Gammons Award by the Lowell Spinners. When not working at the radio station, Teddy helps run his family restaurant on the corner of Shattuck and Market Streets here in the city of Lowell, the Athenian Corner, of course. He's a graduate of Drake High, earned a bachelor's from UMass Lowell and a master's from Emerson College in Mass Communication and Broadcast Journalism. Very impressive, Teddy.
It sounds impressive. I almost don't recognize myself.
I don't either. Are you sure? Is this right? Well, it's great to have you folks here. We're going to talk a little bit about local media, and we have a broad range of expertise and background here, so I'm looking forward to hearing your responses to some of these questions. Let's start with this. The other day, someone asked me what I do as a lawyer. And I've done it for 40 years, but I never really thought about what is it that I do. And so I'd like to ask each of you, those of us who aren't in the media field, think of kind of media folks being in one pigeonhole, but there's lots of different pigeonholes. Are you providers or purveyors of news? Do you comment on the news? Do you entertain? Are you provocateurs? What role do you have in this in this community? So let me start with you, Mimi. What's your role?
I see myself as a facilitator of discussion. I try to be civil in the way I post. I give my opinions, but I'm not dogmatic. I think when blogging started, they referred to the bloggers as citizen journalists. And I still see myself in that fashion. I try to get people talking about a certain subject, try to inform them. And that's why I see my role, just to provide more civic discussion.
So do you see your role, you said, as a citizen journalist? Let me just ask you quickly this. Now, I know that you went to the Oakland School and the Moody School. Did you go to Lowell High School as well?
Of course, proud graduate.
And then where did you go after that?
I went to Northeastern.
Northeastern. Your major was not in this area.
No, it's in history.
In history. And then you, for the last number of years, have been the national sales manager or something like that from the Magellite Corporation. And I know personally that you have flown all over the world for that job. So your job is something other than
Correct.
being a
Correct.
citizen journalist. So I
Correct.
guess you're a citizen journalist, small j, in that sense. You haven't taken journalism
No,
courses,
no,
that kind
no.
of thing. Quickly, for me as a non-media person, when you are functioning as a journalist, are you trying to get out the news? Are you trying to provide your take on the news? What is your role
Probably a
in
little
that?
bit of both. I think with corporate, what's called old media, I don't know if it's still called that, old media, especially with newspapers, the merging of newspapers, corporations owning the newspapers, the local voices got lost a little bit. So it brings back, the community type of discussion. I try not to, that's my style, I try not to create chaos. I want to create a civil discussion on a hot topic, but that's my approach. I want people to be informed from my perspective and inform me in return.
I see. Now, let's go to the other side of the ring with Teddy. And Teddy is a great provocateur, and I say that with great respect because it's part of my job, too, to do that kind of thing. And you like to foment debate and get people engaged and active and so on. But you do a lot of different things. I mean, you're on the air, Ted, from 6 to 10, so you're talking about the news, and someone's delivering the news, and you're commenting on the news, but you're also engaging people in debate about important issues. What do you see your role as?
I see it as a little bit of everything that you discussed. Am I doing journalism at times? Yeah, we report news stories, break news stories. We provide information. Really, that's what we do. We provide information. It's local. It generally deals with the greater Lowell area, the Merrimack Valley. Is there some provocateur there? Of course there is, because part of my job is to generate feedback, get people talking, start a discussion, and sometimes you have to stoke the fire. A lot of it is entertainment. You do a 4-hour show. If you don't entertain people, some of the most informative shows you could watch sometimes die off because they're just not capturing people's attention. And especially in today's world, what captures people's attention and keeps it for a long period of time isn't the same as it was decades ago. So I see myself doing a little bit of everything, but I would say mostly information and entertainment.
So informing people, entertaining people, making people think about things, getting folks riled up a little bit, pro and con, a particular issue. Let's go back over here to Steve. And Steve, I guess you might fall into the political pundit, political satirist category. Is that fair or not?
Lighthearted satirist. I think,
Lighthearted?
yeah.
So what role?
That's the
How would you
focus.
describe your role in the media community here in Lowell?
Parody.
Parody.
A little bit of satire, just trying to hear what people are saying, and then just, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? How can I point out my disagreement without being confrontational? And humor is just kind of one of the tools you can use to do that.
And you have done some stand-up comedy?
I've
have
done a
you?
little bit of stand-up, more as a hobby over the past 20 years.
Wow. What
off
was
and
your
on.
educational background? How did you get to where you
I'm
are?
still being educated. Talking about social media, I'm taking online courses right now through
you are.
UMass towards a bachelor's in psychology and English. And we can go over this a little bit later, but there's definitely a difference between how social media acts on, say, Facebook versus how it serves to operate in an online course. But yeah, I have a I had associates from Middlesex back in the 90s that focused mostly on journalism. Right before that, our firm died. And yeah, that's about that.
Well, let me go to my right over here with Sobin, and I guess you would fall into, Mimi referred to it as the old media. I guess I would call it the more conventional media. Is that fair? Newspapers. But you founded this newspaper. You
Yes.
founded the newspaper, and it now has 50,000 subscribers.
They're not subscriber. I think the number, I wish I have updated my website prior coming to here. I realized that some of the numbers are, off.
Yeah.
So when I first found it, it's, during the first few years, we did serve in 9 states, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, all the way up here. But up until 2010, that's when we expanded here. 2012, I moved down to Lowell and live here and work here. And we focus in New England region, Lowell, Lynn Riviera, Rhode Island. So just like a New England region we focused at in the last, I think, 4 years. So I cut tie. We're no longer in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, not in 9 states anymore. I wish I have updated that, but that's quite all right. But the readership is still as strong because, we here and we work with the community. And the readership is 500,000 readers per year, annually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Forgive me for not knowing this, but the newspaper is all in Khmer?
It's mostly in Cambodian,
Yep.
some English,
Okay, it is.
and biweekly.
And if I wanted to get a copy of it, would I read it online? Do I get it hard copy? What?
It's both. We
Both.
have it online, and but it's in printed also.
And do you cover local news or international news or Cambodian news or what?
Mostly local news, Lowell, in the United States, of course. Very few from out of the state because of the readership interested mostly is local news. And then a little bit from Cambodia and some other culture, things like that.
How many Cambodian newspapers are there in the country today?
Today, I think this is the only one.
Really?
It's the only one that produced local news.
Co-founder and
The-
publisher of the only Cambodian
In the whole
newspaper in
United
the
States,
country.
yes.
Very impressive. All right, well, let me move to a slightly different but similar question, and that is, who is your audience? Who is your audience? Now, I know, for example, that as someone is a great lover of newspapers, whether it's the local Lowell Sun or the Globe or the Times or the Post, whatever it may be. I like the feel of a newspaper on a Sunday afternoon, but I guess all of the trends indicate that newspaper readership is shrinking and the future of newspapers is bleak. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what the people say. I happen to disbelieve
challenge
that,
you on that.
and I happen to disbelieve that on this ground, that I think the future of some of the national and bigger newspapers is not good. But community newspapers have a role to play. Community newspapers have a very important role to play, so I agree with you. But here's the question I have. Who are the consumers of your wares? Each of you is interested in reaching an audience. You all have things you want to say. That's why you do what you do. And you all do it very effectively. But I'm interested in whether you know or have a decent sense of who your audience is. Who do you think that your audience, what age groups, demographically, ethnically, et cetera?
My audience, or radio's audience, local radios, generally, we like to think as many people as possible. You never turn away audience members, but realistically, it's people who are engaged in the community. People with kids in a school system, the educators themselves, people with businesses or the employees at those businesses, students. Oftentimes, our demographic is actually getting a little bit younger, which is something that's pleased me. Older folks also are a big part of that because they grew up with radio being a big part of their lives. But generally, it's people who have an interest or a stake in the local community, the organizations and whatnot. That's pretty much most of my audience. And then occasionally you get somebody who scanning a dial as they're driving through and may be entertained with something that we happen to be talking about during those minutes, and then you hope to capture them as well, and that's where the entertainment part of it comes in, where I have to be part entertainer, as I
But
mentioned.
geographically, Ted, you've got a pretty sizable signal, right?
The signal, it's a 5,000 watt station, but because of where we're positioned, and we go up to, I picked up my folks at Manchester Airport or Logan Airport, and I can follow us there all the way out to the coast, get to the central part of the state a little bit. So it's a huge audience, mostly Merrimack Valley, but it's not uncommon that I'll get a call from somebody who lives in Revere or in Boston even, and also with the internet. That's expanded because now through using social media, Facebook, Twitter, and the ability to stream, I sometimes have comments coming in from China.
Wow.
And it's amazing, how the internet has changed all media.
Right. What about you, Steve? You have kind of a unique set of talents. How many folks can do a haiku about the Lowell Sun backtalk and so on? I would assume because you are someone who's on all sorts of social media that your audience tends to be younger. That's probably true. Tell me about your audience. Who are you trying to reach?
For the back off and haiku column, it was, again, based on the Lowell Sun. So it's people who followed the Lowell Sun but didn't like it. People who read the backtalk column every day and were wondering, okay, I disagree with this strongly. Can somebody please be sarcastic about it? So it was localized. It was the local audience that was more into following the news.
I see. Okay.
Not much of a global reach with that particular project, but with some of my other projects, the more YouTube-based, they're more where I kind of put an entertainment face to environmental issues, such as cleaning up canals, cleaning up rivers. Those get out to anybody who just has any kind of political interest in the environment.
I see. Okay. How about you, Sobin? Your audience, you talked about a little bit about it already. It used to go down to Philadelphia. Now it's more New England based, mostly folks of Cambodian ethnicity.
Right.
But you have a growing base of non-Cambodian readers as well?
We do, but our primary focus still Cambodian readers,
Okay.
because I believe that it's there is a real need, bridging the gaps in so many ways, from news, local news, that in the language that not in their own, that they are left out, not knowing things that's happening in their own city, to new laws coming out, or certain things that as immigrants community they vulnerable to simply because of lack of information. So I try, in the position I am, I try to put out those information a lot more, make it more of a priority.
Lowell,
People.
the Lowell Votes, which is the organization which sponsors and produces this show, they've been trying for the longest time to increase voter turnout in our elections and provide information on candidates and issues and so on. So are you saying you kind of do a little bit what Mimi does, for example, for a city council meeting? In Kamai, you will write about what's happening at the upcoming meeting and then report on what happened at the meeting?
We don't do on a consistent base, but would pick up, if there are issues that they could affect directly the community, and if they need to know new ordinance, come out, or things that affect them, they need to know that those are things. So it's based on a priority of the information, because we small group of people working, we don't have capacity to able to put everything out, and even we do, not necessarily that it's something that would interest them.
Okay.
Like it's based on something that necessary, important, have priority level, and it's kind of the evaluation that comes through this way. I can't really say for sure, oh, this one's not important, that one not important. It's dependent on how much and how quick on the timeline, how quick it's gonna affect them if they don't know it.
Okay.
Or what the bad consequence could happen to them if they don't know it.
I see.
So that kind of determination, field determination.
What about you, Ms. Parsegian, with respect to, who's your audience?
Well, I'm a little bit fortunate to write for Dick's blog, and he was the first blogger in Lowell a long, long time ago, and he's been consistently with his blog. So he has already established an audience, that follows him. Because of his credibility and his honesty, I think he has a pretty good following. And it's a little bit like what Ted said, it's people who are engaged. You have to be engaged to go and seek that. It's not, so it's a little bit people who are engaged. We know the numbers, Dick has the numbers, but I think it's broad. It's just not people who are elected or people who are in the media. I think, I have to say it's people who care, who are engaged. It's not, someone's not going to read about a city council meeting if they're not interested.
Right. If someone's engaged, and hopefully they want to know what the truth is about a particular issue. Someone once said that the purpose of an education is to know when someone else is talking rot. And in this day and age, when if I don't care what you're saying or you're saying, I may say what he's saying or she's saying is fake news. So in this day and age, when we're barraged by media, and it's no longer 4, 5, and 7. Now we've got 150 channels, and I might flip to CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever it may be. How can we possibly determine when someone is talking rot or not? How are we able to separate fact from fiction?
I think at the beginning you cannot tell, but if you follow someone, however you follow them, by listening or watching or reading, after a while you can tell if there's what kind of character this person has and if this person is trying to push an agenda. I think most people are smart enough to determine that this person is like this. I mean, it's not that we don't want to hear opposing point of views, but we want to be told the truth. And if it's done, again, if it's done in a civil fashion, people will listen. I think people can tell eventually that someone's not telling them the truth. What's happening, and we can talk about this, that most people are going to reaffirm their point of view. That's what's happening now. So they don't even get exposed to different.
Is that
point of
what
view.
is called the confirmation bias? And I was talking to Dick earlier tonight, and he talked about that. Do you think that's true, Teddy? I mean, my wife kind of upbraids me times when I'm sitting there watching Fox News. What are you watching Fox News for? And I watch Fox News because I want to hear what folks whom I don't always agree with are saying and what the bases for their position is. What do you think, Ted? Do you think that we tend to gravitate to those folks who are saying kind of things that we like, or what?
I think, unfortunately, that is the
Yeah.
case, and you see it on when you get in a good Facebook thread with lots of back and forth. Does anybody know anyone whose mind has ever been changed by something that I've said on the radio or something that somebody has written on Facebook? You go back and forth, but there's very little. I would be shocked if anybody actually has changed their mind based on what's said. With that said, though, what you do, I think, is important. You said you watch Fox News, and I tend to watch more CNN than Fox News because is there something I'm missing? Is there something that I'm not thinking of the way I approach something? And I wish more people would do that because at the very least it make you think. If you do it often enough, you'll find that, you know what, maybe it won't necessarily change your mind or it may not change your political affiliation, but you may understand where the person who has the other opinion is coming from. And you'll realize, you and I, we've disagreed on issues, but I'll never say you're an idiot because of your view. I understand you're coming at it from a reasonable point of view, but you grew up differently than me, you were taught differently than me, different upbringing. So we can both be very intelligent in our disagreement, and neither one of us is right or wrong. But most people don't get that. I think what you find is you're either right or they're idiots. And it ends there, and I think that's really one of the dangers of
it's very
what's
well
happening
said,
with social
but
media.
The thing that occurs to me hearing what you're saying is how are we ever going to get together on these issues? So, for example, take gun control, and I'm just throwing that out as one issue. So you have your point of view, I have my point of view. If we just gravitate to the folks who we think are, support our position, are we ever going to be able to find common ground? And I mean, newspapers have to find a way to do that, right? You must do that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting issue. I actually, in my position, I never have to worry so much about, what is my personal agenda on on certain so-and-so issue, I don't worry so much about it. So, you know, a lot of time, like when I jump on an issue, first thing you look at is what is the true or the truest information that available you could find, and you verify by multiple source, and you call up somebody if you need to talk to some people, and then you come down and say, okay, so this one is okay, that's not, like you pinpoint. And once you decide to pull, you know, couple string, and then you decide, by the end of the day, you decide, okay, this is how much information could be shared. It's not necessary, you're not telling the rest, not necessarily you lying, but it's just not necessary.
Right.
Because I think that's what some people don't understand the role of traditional media, why we filter. Like, we filter, this is not necessary that lying or hiding something, but you pull, because the information is so much out there, and you can only deliver in a certain amount length that allowing people to focus and pay their attention, and it has to be in one track, like one story, one track, and you have a few things you need to pitch in during that time, and it has to present in that way, and you know, you pull a few string and you decide this is how it's going to be, and it's good enough even you leave a few details. And I think most of us people who are in our industry, even we publish a story this way, if someone tells a little bit different, we know it, they're not wrong either. So news media, like just Washington Post, Boston Globe or New York Times, they may tell a story about gun control or about taxes, one issue a little bit differently, but none of them are lying. I don't believe any of them are lying, but we just have to read multiple sources, and we evaluate what sort of priority, what's affect our own audience.
Right.
And that's how, and we can decide how we're going to communicate that at an easy level to our readers. Because what's the point if you write so sophisticated research paper, but they don't get it?
Right.
Most people need a fifth grade reading level.
Yeah. Well, it raises the next question. We have a couple of minutes before our break, and that is, I, for example, in my job, have to talk to young lawyers all the time. And they're so pleased because they got all the facts. They've marshaled all the facts. So they're going to give the facts to the client. My point is, the client doesn't want the facts. Or what the client wants is you interpreting those facts in support of their position. What do the facts mean? So we can all give facts about a news story or whatever it may be, but what does it mean? And one of my concerns as someone a little bit older than you and others is that we have a whole generation of folks who learn and get their news from Twitter and banners and quick headlines and that kind of thing. Are they really learning what it all means? You're in the business of telling people what it means, right? Through humor and haikus and so on.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah, but it depends on what's posted. If what's being shared on Twitter is a link to an actual article, simply a matter of following that back. I think most of what social media is, when it's used properly, is that first article that nobody reads, because then it's just 700 comments going back and forth of poor argument techniques, as you said. It's all ad hominems and whatnot.
But if people are reading, Steve, all of those comments, and I don't do it because I'm not
Which is a waste of time,
That's
yeah.
right. Aren't they wasting their time rather getting into the
Yeah,
argument?
if you have an argument thread that's 700 comments, that's 50,000 words, that's as long as a Kurt Vonnegut novel. You're better off reading the Vonnegut.
Yeah.
But yeah,
He's one of my favorite authors, so you just...
It's up to us as social media consumers to make sure that those arguments are more worthwhile, that there's actually constructive debate in those. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier when I was comparing Facebook to an online course. In an online course, you're more concerned about getting a grade. Everybody's far more civil. Everybody's looking more towards, all right, this is my grade on the line. Facebook, there's nothing on the line except for the last word, so it's never going to happen. It's just two people arguing about who started the argument and who gets the last word.
Great.
There's not, it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, I agree entirely with that. We're going to take a little bit of a break now. We're here with Mimi Parsegian and Steve Rat Albert, Sobin Pin, and Teddy Panos as well. A great panel of media folks. Wait till you hear what's going to happen in the next half hour. Stick around. We'll be back. I'm Mike Gallagher. This is the Lowell Votes sponsored show, Civic Sanctuary.
The Life Connection Center in Lowell is a community center for the homeless that provides complimentary meals, recovery support, and a safe place to sit and eat with friends and volunteers. Private donations provide 100% of the center's programs. Donations and volunteering are two ways to help us continue to serve the homeless in Middlesex County. Help us make the Life Connection Center a place of hope.
Hi, I'm Alana Flood. What's happening this week in Lowell? Find out. Join me for LTC News Thursdays at 6 on Channel 8.
Hi, this is the second half hour of our monthly program. This program's on our local media. We've got some great guests, Mimi Parsegian, our blogger, and Steve Albert, our haikuist, and Sobin Pin, the co-founder of the Cambodian newspaper, which is up and down the New England states, and of course Teddy Panos, the voice of the Merrimack Valley. So we want to get a little bit more local with some of these questions. We started with some more general areas, and I'd like to ask you a question that we've asked a number of folks who've been on this show. It was kind of epitomized by the recent high school debate where a number of observers felt that there were kind of two Lowells. And people have talked about it in other contexts, two Lowells in terms of ethnicity, two Lowells in terms of socioeconomic classes, two Lowells in terms of separated by the river, you know, that kind of thing. You guys are all astute observers of the local scene. What do you think about that? Is that a bunch of malarkey, or is there any truth to it?
I think there's about 115,000 Lowells. Even in an issue as divisive as the high school, yeah, there were two sides, but a lot of people went into those two sides based on their own concerns. So everybody goes into a side, no matter whether it's two sides, whether it's three sides. By the way, on diversity, way more than just two ethnicities in Lowell. But people go into an issue, even if it's a simple, straightforward, black-white, divisive issue, they come into it with their own perspective, for their own reasons. So just, yeah, way more than two Lowells.
What about you, Mimi?
I agree with Steve, but I think the same way there's two groups, the groups the way I see divide are the people who have economic power, political strength, you know, people like us who talk, who are out there. Then you have people who just live their life and are not part of the decision making. So those of us who somehow are in the decision making group, and then you have people who are not. Now, it could be that these people don't want to be part of it. They just want to live their life. My concern is that is our group open enough that if you want to come and join us, do we accept you? So I agree with Steve. Lowell is very complicated and complex. The high school issue, there was two sides, but they were all part of the same group. You know, there were people who were engaged. So I don't see Lowell as divided in half like that. I see those who are engaged and involved and have political power, economic strength, and those who are trying to get into that group.
So not black and white, many colors.
Yeah.
Ted?
I would agree. I think with both of you, there's a lot of different Lowells. You can split it up, this half and that half, over socioeconomic status, ethnicity, income level, political beliefs. I think you can do all that, neighborhood. And then there's also a segment that just don't care, right? You talk about the
Right.
people who are involved politically and have clout, and those who don't, and then there's some that, they don't care. And I think a lot of that breaks down on people who were born, raised in Lowell, plan to live their whole life here, hope their kids live here and their grandkids. And then there are people who are just kind of using Lowell as a stop along the way. Maybe a job brought them here,
Yep.
but they don't have the roots and will eventually move on. A lot of college students, some come, go, some stay. They think they want to stay, they leave. So there's many different Lowells, but you can always find, depending on the issue, you can find one side and the other side on it, I think.
Let me ask you, so Ben, kind of a takeoff on that question is, do we as media folks, I should say, do you as media folks, have any responsibility to try to bring the disparate Lowells together? Is that even worth doing? There's something to be said for 115,000 different Lowells. But to a certain extent, we have to unite on big issues. For example, the high school. I think we all probably agree, regardless of what position we took, that if we're going to get this done one way or another, there has to be some unity on it. Does the media, does the Kamai Post have any obligation, in your view, to help bring a community together?
Well, I think all media has responsibility toward our readers, our citizens, in informing, understanding, and help them to understand the process of the important participation in a civic engagement issue like this. And I think from my part, we did the best that we have done that we could. But I think in process of we trying to do so, what I found was were not all information available to us. At the time that we should have received them was a lack of communication from the administrator, from school departments, from the city, from the city management, all that. So, like, we didn't get this information that we needed at early stage. And
You're talking about the high school.
right, for the high school, in order to get the word out and get people engaged in an early stage, not until the issues already was divided into half. Like, basically people start taking science, and that's when people start pulling us in. By then it was already late. Like, people already took science and argues everywhere. But for us, even then, I mean, our job was really just trying to evaluate what was really the best, what we thought was the best, with the information that we have had. What would be the best in our view, based on the experience people in our community, the economic and the opportunity that they have. So, we were pro-Kali because we felt that the community needs it. But at the same time, I felt sad. I felt sad that people had to make that kind of choice and had to fight for that kind of choice. In fact, for the size of our city, people could even have more than one high school. They could build another one and still keep this one. Like, I felt that, it was just sad that people had to fight and go through this. It could have been just come from a city overview of mission and some kind of objective development for the city, and just come out and pitch and say, hey, we had this vision, what do you think, blah, 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 whatnot. But we didn't have that kind of opportunity.
Whose job was that? Whose job was that?
To what?
Well, Sobin is saying that in the Cambodian community, they didn't get enough critical information soon enough. And I heard that from some other quarters. And I guess you can never please everyone and you can never reach everyone. But generally speaking, you guys are in the business, and certainly both of you were in the business, and you as well, and you may have been too, Steve, of getting the word out about this issue.
But I think one of the problems with the whole discussion was that every time there was some kind of information, the following week the information was, well, maybe it's not this, it's that. That was the whole issue with the discussion. Never mind going to the Cambodian community speaking Khmer. To the general community, when you're speaking in English, and week to week there's a little bit of a shift. I think that was the real problem. I thought that having two groups really motivated and wanted to get involved was good. I think it was very good. Unfortunately, what I didn't like, at some point it became what you were saying earlier, calling each other names. And the civil discussion stopped. We stopped listening to each other. At the beginning, it was a good debate. A lot of good things came out. I'm not sure here, I'm not sure there. I mean, I began one side, then I went to the other. I mean, it was a good debate, and then it fell apart.
Well, let me ask you this, and now you're getting me riled up a little bit.
It's about time.
No, I'm sorry.
Sitting there so cool and calm.
No, your question was about, I want to address your question.
Okay.
About, why we didn't get the information.
Right.
We just didn't get it.
Yeah.
City manager's office or mayor's office responsible, whatever, whichever of those office, or planning department, I don't know, whichever one, they're responsible to get press release out.
That may be a subject for another,
I mean,
another meeting.
and then we didn't get it.
I agree with you. It starts with firsthand sources. It
Yeah.
starts
Yeah.
with the government making information available, and then it's up to media consumers to get it, ideally from firsthand sources.
Right.
It's not really the media's job to
But
hand
if,
feed people.
but if I may disagree, though, the people who don't get the information, and Sobet and I have had some good battles about this on the radio, they didn't want it at the beginning. Look, how many public sessions were held? How many public hearings? The high school process is 5 years in the making. It didn't just start in April of 2017. I was focused on it in October and November of 2016 on the radio. Problem is, by the time everybody started to get engaged, by that point we had 4 options. And now it was pick your option, what do you want, and start battling over it. But when everybody was going around to community input sessions to ask, hey, what does the community want? There were 8 people there. And to me, the most telling moment was when a woman from the Hispanic community, she called herself a leader of the Hispanic community, who lived in the River Place Towers, was interviewed by the Lowell Sun and said, I didn't even know they were building a new high school. And suddenly everybody scrambled to give her a tour of the high school and convince her that their side was the best. You're a leader, a self-proclaimed leader of the Hispanic community. You live across the street from the high school, and in May of 2017, you don't know that we have this debate going on? Whose responsibility is that ultimately? At some point, you have to want to be engaged as a citizenry, and those who were, boy, did we get engaged.
Well,
So-
I disagree with you on this.
I'm surprised.
No, I mean, for one, like for me, why am I hearing myself? I'm sorry.
Minor technical feedback issue, don't worry about
No, I'm sorry, the mic.
it. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, losing.
That's okay. So, but tell you what,
Chain
Can we
of
come
thought.
back to that in a second?
Right.
Yeah.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
let,
Sure, thank you.
Steve's been wanting to jump in.
So what do you see the role of, as yourself, as your talk show host, is it your role to force feed people, to make the information available? What is your role as, we agree that it's the role of the eventual consumer to find out information. What's your role as a provider?
I was trying to get as much information as possible. I talk to the city manager on a monthly basis. When I'm not talking to the city manager, I'm talking to a rotating band of city councilors. I'm talking to the school superintendent. I'm talking to school committee members. I'm trying to get the information out there. Problem is, I can't force you to put that radio
Right.
dial on. I can't force you to read your blogs. I can't force you to read your blogs. I can't force somebody to read the Kamai Post. If those people then turn around months later and say, well, I didn't know anything about this, well, at some point, an engaged citizenry, there's a responsibility there as well. And that's why I said I think a lot of people just didn't care and then got caught up in the political battle of it.
Yeah, and that may be symptomatic of a greater issue and a greater concern, and that is the malaise, or whether it might be a little bit of an apathy. And there may be some people that are truly apathetic, but just having been involved around schools for more years than I want to say, since my son was in kindergarten, I think most of it has to do with a feeling of powerlessness, that no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to make a difference. And I know that sounds whatever, but I really do believe there's something to that. So it's incumbent, I believe, on our city officials, but on our media as well, to find ways to reach out and to engage folks in civilized dialogue. Now, this is where I break ranks with the newspaper, because as you know, you were involved, I was involved in the high school debate as well, and I reached out to the newspaper. And I said, let's have a civilized debate. Let's talk about the facts. Let's get the information out to folks so that they can make informed decisions. How much is it going to cost? What is it really going to mean? How long is it going to take? What are the environmental issues? We need to be having regular presentations in the media about that kind of thing so we can make informed decisions. In my view, respectfully, and the newspaper can do whatever it wants to do, the editorial staff at the newspaper decided to go in a different way. And that's where there was a lot of name calling. in the editorials and otherwise.
And that's where I think people don't understand the different roles of the media. Remember how I told you I see myself as providing information, providing entertainment, engaging people, being a provocateur. Same thing with the newspaper. You read the front page of the newspaper, there's a story about a toxic cleanup. There's a story about a school committee issue that happened in Chelmsford. And people read that. But once you get inside, now you start mixing in the opinion pieces, the editorial pieces, and those are designed to be the opinion, like what I do, part of what I do. I give opinion. I try to provoke, try to engage people and get discussion. I'm not sure people understand the difference so much. So if you take an opinion, if you know what an opinion piece is, take it for what it goes. If you know what the information piece is, take it for what it goes. I think one of the things that's happened, though, people are gravitating towards the opinion piece. Remember when CNN started,
I think-
24-hour news. Now it's not
No,
24-hour
but I
news.
think with our local newspapers, some people believe that the editorial point of view has leaked into the coverage. You can tell the truth, but you can tell a partial truth. Okay, you don't give the whole picture. You give half the picture. And on the school issue, I believe this little high school issue, a lot of people believe that this is what's happening. It's seeping through to the news. And-
That's true in all
yeah.
media. You are correct about that. If you pick a newspaper, and I can tell you what
Of
their
course,
editorial,
yeah.
but the Globe is liberal, the
Correct.
Herald is
What they
conservative.
choose to cover,
You
the
know,
headlines.
exactly, and you can also intentionally manipulate it. And TV newscasts do the same thing. Radio newscasts. You report certain stories, and you can make someone look like a hero, or you can make them look like a villain, depending on what you
The
report.
pictures you put of the people.
Well,
But does it-
but I mean, that's the thing that we don't do with our newspaper. Because in our,
You don't
in
have
our
an editorial
community,
page?
we have, but we don't do that type of
And
analysis
that's right.
and labeling.
There's a
We don't do
difference
that kind of
between
thing.
expressing an opinion
Yeah.
in an editorial and calling people treasonous. And,
That
and-
one still gets you.
and I think that crossed a line in my view and signaled we're not going in the direction
Yeah.
of civilized, candid debate. We're going in a different direction. And that's where we get back to the role of media. And what is your role? Is it just to entertain, to inform, to provoke? Or is there also a responsibility
Well,
with the media?
there's a responsibility to sell ads. They are,
But isn't there a higher responsibility, Steve?
if it's a business, no. No, unfortunately.
So
that's-
in the journalism field, there isn't a higher responsibility?
There is no Hippocratic oath in the journalism field, no.
Well, from our ends, we have.
I understand it's a respectable ideal, but it's not a bottom line.
What do you say about that?
That's not how I ran my business in the last 10 years. If I didn't
Good.
respect our principle, we'd be closed down even before the sunrise from the first edition. It would never happen. 'Cause
But when you write an editorial, whoever is writing it, you're human. Your opinion is going. An informed reader is going to know what your opinion is. It's otherwise that's where you have a news story where you interview someone from each side and you let it there and let the reader or the listener or the viewer interpret. But an editorial, your opinion can't help but seep out. And
But isn't there
no,
something to be said for
but there
civil
is.
discourse?
Yeah, there is.
Yes.
Civility.
Yeah.
By
Yes.
choosing to cover a certain thing, let's say there's two events, or you choose to cover one, indirectly you are influencing because you haven't given the other event, whether it's, let's say it's a social event. So you're covering Teddy's having something. You're covering Teddy, but Michael's having something he's not covered. Now Teddy gets the publicity. But it'd be great if we had a lot of media that covered a lot of things, but we don't. So indirectly, the media, because limited, you are promoting one thing and perhaps not promoting the other. It's impossible for you to be everywhere all the time, correct? So a little bit of that occurs.
But also, if I
Right.
can jump into something Steve said, you talked about the bottom line is important. And yes, it is. Look, it's commercial. If there isn't money to pay the bills, you're not
Right.
broadcasting, you're not printing a newspaper. But I won't speak for other entities, but I know with television and radio, you have a responsibility. Part of that FCC license that you get, you have to document a certain number of community service type hours of programming.
Right.
So we'll talk to, along with disagreeing with me on the high school, 2 months later, Attorney Gallagher's coming in and talking about an Art Up project he's doing with the Lowell Community Health Center. We do that as a radio station, A, because we think it's important to promote the community, but B, it's also a requirement we have to do. We have to serve the community. And I think that gets lost in some of the opinion type broadcasting that people do or writing. But to me, that's one of the things that makes Lowell so special, is that we do have a newspaper and a radio station, and whether you agree with our editorial bent or our opinions or not, one of the things to me that makes Lowell better than most of communities like Lowell is we have a very strong and vibrant media. So look, we deserve criticism oftentimes, but I think the people who wish we would go away sometimes are losing fact of what the city might be without us. And I don't want to sound arrogant saying
No,
that,
it's not
but
a point.
look at certain cities that don't have this, and they're not they're not as vibrant because you don't have anyone to promote your cultural
Again, I wasn't
aspects
saying
and so
it
on and
critically,
so
I was
forth.
saying I accept that selling to confirmation bias is a part of keeping a station alive.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that, and maybe it's a matter of the fact that you have a statutory obligation and I have an ethical obligation under the rules of professional responsibility to not just have a scorched earth policy when I'm defending someone. I have to have a respect for the other side. I have to have a civil engagement with the court. I have to have a respect for the rules of ethics. And I'm not talking about anyone being unethical. I'm just raising the question as to whether in the Lowell High School debate, but in any debate, the media has some responsibility at the end of the day to try to advance the ball. And by that I mean making sure that accurate information is given to as many folks as possible so that they can make up their minds. Now let me segue to a somewhat different, because we only have about 5+ minutes to go. One of the questions that we have asked all of our guests is kind of a hot button one, and that has to do with I don't want to say the war, but the coexistence of the business community and the human services community. And a city like Lowell, which has been a refugee resettlement area, a home to immigrants and so on, we have a good number of what used to be called poverty-related agencies. There are those who want to see the downtown full of thriving businesses, who wouldn't? And there are those who are saying, are there certain agencies and organizations which maybe we don't have the right balance, say, between thriving businesses and those organizations which provide human services? I'm not taking a position on this, but I'm just throwing that out to you folks who are so involved in the community. What about you, Ted?
A gentleman who we both know, one of my favorite bloggers and Facebook provocateurs, Jack Mitchell, likes to say poverty is big business. One of my biggest disappointment with the city of Lowell is that poverty has become the biggest business. If there is a dollar to be made off people's suffering, misery, misfortune, someone's going to find a way to make it, and generally they're going to find their way to Lowell. And that entails private business people who are profiting. It also entails nonprofit organizations who started with the intent of helping people and then became so consumed with the necessary funds to help those people that they just try to preserve themselves and continue to grow and expand their services, and they grow and grow and grow. And eventually you look and the people you're serving are now into their third generation of living in the same situation, and their grandkids are now growing up, and have we really helped anybody except a few people who've made some money along the way? And that's my biggest
And you
disappointment
just
with
took
the
a
city of
strong
Lowell.
position. You did it in a very civil way.
And you didn't call me an idiot,
And I
see?
did. And I have a civil disrespect for you. I mean, civil disagreement, I should say. I have a great deal of respect for you, but a civil disagreement about that. However, I don't disagree that in certain circumstances it has become a big business. What do you feel about that, Ms. Parsegian?
I know I'm probably at the 180 degrees politically from Teddy, but I agree with him.
Oh, my gosh. That's the first
I-
time.
Yeah, I want people to be helped, those who need help, and I think it's great that Lowell is a welcoming city for refugees, and we probably have a lot of social services because the towns next to us don't have it, but I think it's becoming a little bit too entrenched in our lives that these organizations are becoming pretty big and they're getting involved in a lot of things, instead of helping the people, build homes. Let's say, I benefited from a nonprofit that helped me get a loan, and it's a small nonprofit and it still does a very good job. And a lot of us bought homes through that. And it's just, I think it's one person who runs it. So you can run a good nonprofit with a small staff. Your goal has to be limited, and you have to be focused. And this way you can count how many people you help. So I think it's time Lowell had a discussion along those lines.
Well, I think it's always good to have a discussion. I'm involved with a number of those organizations, and I have lots of respect for the folks that do that kind of work, and I think they've come a long way and do a lot of good things. But I'm not saying that you don't have a point in that regard. Now, we have about 3 minutes left, so I'd like you to run through fairly quickly. You guys are not only, now we have 2 minutes left, astute political observers, but you're also, you also have the capacity to project what's going to happen down the line. 2, 5, 10 years. We have a newspaper now, we have a radio station, we've got a Cambodian newspaper, lots of bloggers. What's the media landscape going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years? Start with you, Steve.
I don't see a whole lot of changes. I see CAP still being around. I see Lowell Sun still being around. And I see most folks still getting most of their news through one form of social media or another. And hopefully LTC will still be there as well.
Okay, I hope so. Mimi?
Yeah, I agree with him. I think the same infrastructure we have today would be around for the media, maybe a little bit more robust, because I think as people come up, they're used to using social media to promote themselves, like like he did. There'll be perhaps more people like him. But no, I don't see a major change. Maybe new ownership at the Lowell Sun, perhaps. But
You think the Sun will be around?
in some format, yeah. Look, the newspapers that thrive are the ones who have a good online presence that you pay to. So it might be.
Just a minute between the two of you guys. Where do you think the media will be in a couple of years?
I think we will still be pretty much the same or better, because with new technology will allow people to do more effectively.
Great, well said.
I-
Mr. Panos?
I think all of the existing media will be around. I will predict that within 5 to 10 years, there'll be the next Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, that will rise and become a player. And then all the old media, like radio and newspaper, will find a way to incorporate that new technology and continue to expand their
But
service.
will we finally have a hotel on the corner of Shattuck and Market
Within
Streets?
12 months, God willing, you will have one,
Yes,
sir.
that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for talking with us today. It was a very interesting discussion. It was great
My
to meet
pleasure.
you, Steve. I'm looking forward to seeing some of those haikus.
Thank you.
Teddy Panos, congratulations and good luck with the hotel over
Thank
the
you.
next 12 months.
Thank
So Ben Pinn, what a great story about this newspaper that you founded in New England, and keep it
Thank
up.
you. Thank you.
We'll do what we can to support it.
Thank you.
And Steve, we're looking forward to reading some of your haikus and hearing your comedy.
I'll try to get back into bringing them up.
I think it'll be great.
You got it. Bringing it back then.
Okay. And Mimi, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
And thanks so much for your work in the blogosphere and your great columns about the City Council as well. We appreciate that. I'm Mike Gallagher. This is Civic Sanctuary. We're very grateful that all of you have joined us. We're also very grateful to the City of Lowell and to LTC for enabling us to do this kind of programming, and particularly thankful to Lowell Votes for sponsoring and producing this program. We've been here talking about the local media, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks very much.